Well, folks, Battlegrounds is getting an update. Naga are on the way. And I'm going to run through the Naga minions that have been revealed so far, including some details on their new keyword, Spellcraft, trying to give you an idea how all this might come together. Sounds like there will be more reveals over the next few days, but for now, I think we have 4 or 5 minions to break all this down. Starting off here with the Mini Myrmidon, a new tier 1 Naga. It's a 1/3 and it reads Spellcraft. Give a minion +2 attack until your next turn. So Spellcraft is a keyword that will give you a spell. You can see there above it the 0 gold mini trident. So the text next to the keyword just tells you what's going to be on the spell. It'll give you the spell both when you play it and at the start of each recruitment phase. And importantly, these spells, unlike every other buff in Battlegrounds during the tavern recruitment phase, they are not permanent. They only last until the end of that combat. So basically each turn, you're going to get one of these mini tridents from the Mini Myrmidon. You're going to get to choose what minion to put it on. It's going to last through that combat. Then the next turn, you'll get another one, and you'll get to choose what minion to put it on. So instead of providing like long-term stacking, scaling stats, these offer a little bit more flexibility, and there will be other Naga to synergize with them, doing things like, getting buffed when you play spells, those sorts of things. I also got some additional details from Blizzard regarding Spellcraft I wanted to run through because there are actually quite a bit of little tricksy things to think about. So here are the full Spellcraft details. Spellcraft spells are generated as soon as you play the Spellcraft minion and at the start of each recruitment phase. That is important because even if you just play a Spellcraft minion and you're like cycling through and you sell it, you're still going to get a buff to use temporarily. So there are some upsides to cycling through things. Maybe not quite as much as like a Battlecry buff minion where those stats would stick around, but you still get some upside and might be able to proc additional spell effects. Spellcraft effects only last until your next recruit phase. Again, I think that's really important because that works very differently than what we've seen for other stuff in Battlegrounds. Typically, buffs in the Tavern phase stick. Buffs during combat do not. Even though these are in the Recruit/Tavern phase, they don't stick. That means that each turn you get to choose where you put your spells for the next combat. So that can be advantageous if you pick up a Cave Hydra, you can start pumping it immediately. You don't have to have worried about scaling it over the course of the game, for instance. Spellcraft spells leave your hand at the end of your turn. If you don't use them, you lose them. So there's really no reason to hold on to these. You just play them out every turn. And if your hand is full, Spellcraft spells will wait until there is a free space in your hand instead of getting destroyed or being delayed a turn. So that could be a concern if you have stuff stacking up in hand. You've played a big cycle of golden minions. You got just a bunch of junk left over. Maybe you got some blood gem generation to synergize with spell stuff as well. And this makes sure you're still getting full value off of your Spellcraft minions. So in regards to the Mini Myrmidon specifically, obviously you play this guy down. He's basically a 3/3 for your tier 1 purchase because you can just put this mini trident on him right away. That's going to trade okay into lots of stuff, so he's fine there. And then, as the game wears on, you just keep playing these on your best thing, maybe a Divine Shield, a Cleave, whatever has any sort of attack bonus. You can use the mini trident to keep that minion trading well, but you're never going to blow anybody's mind with this because it's capped at 2 attack per turn. You're not going to get 10 attack over the course of the first 5 turns. It's always just 2 attack, so it falls off pretty fast. I don't think this is a card you want to stick to long term by any means. You're probably going to be dumping this guy really quickly. He's not something that can last into the late game as far as I can tell. So let's take another look here at another Spellcraft card. This is the Shoal Commander, a tier 3 Battlegrounds minion. He's a 2/2 Naga. Spellcraft, give a minion +1/+1 for each friendly Naga until next turn. You can see there the 0 mana version up there. That's what it looks like in hand. And yeah, this is obviously gives you bonuses for Naga synergy. So at a base, this is 1/1 with just the Shoal Commander. So you get a little bit immediately, but if you have some Naga stacking up, maybe this is your 4th Naga. You got a 4/4 buff. That's not too bad right off the bat. And then obviously over the course of the game, you get up to 7, 7/7 every time off the Shoal. If you golden this guy, which isn't too difficult at tier 3, you're suddenly looking at a 14/14 buff every turn, which again is pretty substantial. It's still not going to be the sort of thing that scales forever and stacks up a big pile of stats. But the goal, I presume, we haven't seen all these Naga minions yet, is that when you have spell activations, you got a bunch of these buffs rolling, suddenly you start building these pretty monumental boards, and you have the flexibility to put this 14/14 on a cleave minion, on that Divine Shield minion, and that makes it more useful as opposed to just getting taller and taller minions over the course of the game. The utility, the flexibility, hopefully gives you some nice advantages. So on the other side of things, we have minions that benefit from having spells played, like the Snail Cavalry here. A tier 2 5/2 Naga reads once per turn. After you cast a spell, gain 2 health. So early in a game, this basically becomes a 5/4 for your tier 2 minion. Kind of a big stat line, but honestly not that scary. Like, yeah, that 5 is going to trade up into pretty much everything at that stage, but any sort of token minions are going to eat through this 4 health pretty easily. So I think this is just an in a pinch. Grab this for a few turns just to get some tempo on board, get some stats down. But again, I feel like this is an early game minion you're going to ditch really, really easily. Some early game minions can stick around for a while. Doesn't feel like that's the case for either of the ones we've seen so far. So this one's pretty fun. The Storm Scale Siren, a tier 3 Naga. She's a 5/4 and reads, at the end of your turn, your Spellcraft minions cast their spells on themselves. Golden version, they do it twice. So this really rewards you for building up some nice Spellcraft minions. Not only are you going to get those spells in hand to utilize and be able to hit some good prime targets, but in this case, you're just going to kind of cement your entire board with some additional stats. And as we saw, like particularly, that one that's buffing per Naga on board, like that guy could get pretty big on the back of a Storm Scale Siren himself, while also still pushing some stats out elsewhere. So this is where you start seeing things come together, right? This is where you get the stacking versions of these buffs multiple times in a single turn. I think that's where it makes sense, because independently on their own, it doesn't feel very good. But when you start, getting layers on layers of these spells, suddenly you can see how the boards are going to get big each individual turn. Now, the Stormscale Siren does make minions like the Snail Cavalry even worse, because you're going to want as many Spellcraft minions on board as you can get, and guys like the Snail Cavalry just aren't going to make sense in that world. So I think most people are going to focus on building out Spellcraft, sacrificing a little bit of early tempo to make sure they're set up for some mid-game swings on the back of the Stormscale Siren and similar style minions. So our final minion here is the tier 6 Tide Mistress Athissa. A 7/8 Naga, pretty big base stat line there. 14/16 here on the golden version just seems big in its own right. And it reads, after you cast a spell, give 4 friendly Naga +1/+1. So here we finally see some permanent scaling offered off of Athissa. So if you get this down early enough, you're going to start building some big time permanent buffs off the back of this minion if you're able to cycle a bunch of spells, which, you might have, say, 6 Spellcraft minions. And this is going to give an additional 24/24 per turn. 6 spells times 4 buffs for +1/+1. That's where it starts to go, okay, now I get my permanent scaling as well to kind of cap this off in the late game. So you're probably using these Spellcraft spells for tempo through the mid game, just kind of swarming a lot of stats, hoping to overwhelm people, maybe even using that to your advantage to tier up faster. Find things like Athissa, and then maybe this is the cap on your build where you start getting really big for the late game as well. Before, of course, you fail to Malcatons and Poisonous and whatever else, but hey, that's a different problem. So I think this looks really fun, right? And there are, of course, other spells as well. It's not just your Spellcraft spells. You have like Blood Gems. You can maybe get, spend gold to get Blood Gems and use that as an additional way to get some nice buffs. And since this is buffing specifically Naga, you could kind of target the right things potentially as well. Make sure you're cementing things that are permanent for your board, not accidentally buffing stuff that might just be sort of transitory there. You've also got just golden rewards. Remember, those are actually spells and they get in your hands. There might be some shenanigans there. Just getting multiple goldens out for Athissa could also help you squeeze in some extra buffs along the way. So this actually looks really fun. I like the idea of just spamming a ton of spells and watching my board get ginormous along the way. And then we also have a new hero here. It's Shara herself coming to Battlegrounds. This is kind of a cool 2-part hero power. You start off with Ashara's Ambition. It's a passive. When your warband reaches 30 total attack, you begin your Naga conquest. Then you get a 1 gold hero power that discovers a Naga. And needless to say, a 1 gold hero power that just gets you a minion is really good. So you're not only saving gold per purchase there, and it's actually kind of free because you could always sell that minion, but you're also just able to discover exactly what you might need for your build. So whether that's getting, you know, the big tier 5 or tier 6 thing you've been looking for, just finding some treasures, finding a good temporary spellcraft, I think there's a lot of options here for Naga Conquest. So A+ result. The question is, will you hit it quickly enough? 30 attack might be kind of tough. We haven't seen anything that scales specifically attack. We got some like health buffs, of course, general stat gains. Might be tough to get up to 30, but you only need to do it once. So you can like kind of just go for like maybe an all-in spellcraft, get up to 30, and then boom. I haven't kind of tried to parse out like the average stat lines of boards at various turns. So I don't know exactly where that would land, but I think it's going to be close. Like you might just sacrifice too much early for Naga Conquest to catch you up. But if you get a good streak, get a good set of minions early, maybe don't even buy Naga minions, just buy things with high attacks. We got some like dragon scaling guys at tier 1, for instance, might be able to cheese into Conquest sooner, pivot to Nagas, and then start overwhelming people. So this does look pretty fun and quite powerful once you get there. So that's always high potential for good players, I think, to utilize that well. So all in all, the Naga package sounds really fun. I like the idea of kind of choosing these spells every turn. It gives you a lot of interaction and like, you know, decision points every given scenario. You can kind of try to match up against your opponent's board. I'm going to buff this thing for this reason because I need to deny this play. I got to go for this guy specifically this time to answer their blah, blah, blah. You know, you have decision points and a lot of different ways to manipulate these spells, which sounds quite engaging as the player. As far as power output's concerned, I do feel like some of this stuff looks a little weak to me, like the Snail Cavalry. I don't know if that holds up all that well. So a bit nervous in regards to how this scales into the late game. It feels like building out a good board that's like sticky and significant late might be tough, but it's one of those things you probably have to see in action. And of course, we've got way more minions to see as well, which could really start to pull this picture together. So I'm sure they'll come out strong and fine. Blizzard wouldn't release new stuff that's not pretty dang good, I think. So all in all, curious to hear your thoughts here about the Spellcraft minions, the Naga, and whether you're excited to try this out in Battlegrounds or not. I'm also going to put a link down in the description to the like official blog post for all this stuff, so you can read a few more details here and there, especially regarding the schedule for this week as we get more minions. I'll be doing more breakdowns of minions like this for whatever that's worth for you. We want to see these over the next few days, so stay tuned for that. Thanks much for watching, and until next time, game on. Step aside.